We're learning Hechaltzu of the Rebbe Rashab. We're in chapter 27. We're coming towards the end. In this chapter, the Rebbe Rashab is going to take us into the world of Kabbalah and deep Chassidus. And that is that this idea that we really discussed at length yesterday, that there is a possibility of synergy between Chochmah and Bina, between creativity and amplification, that although they come from two separate places in the soul, nevertheless they could live in peace. It takes the greater illumination of something that's greater than each on its own to bring them together. That was the concept that we spoke about, and I gave a few concrete examples with stories, and I put it on now. My classes are going on to Spotify. My everything is going on to Spotify with God's help. So you can drive wherever you're driving, and you could listen to Spotify if you have that access as well, in addition to YouTube. So let's learn now chapter 27. To understand this better, Yuvdim Behegdim will understand it by prefacing Tchila, initially Inyan Hahelim V'Hagilui B'Sheiresh Harishin, the concept of concealment and revelation in its original source. And as the sages say, Mitchilas B'Riyosei Shel Olam, at the very beginning, when God created the world, Bereishach Sheicha V'Hoda Nahida. First there was darkness, and then there was light. Sheyesh Kan Gam Kein B'Chinas Choshech V'Oir. What this points to, what this Talmudic teaching points to, that there was at the very beginning of creation darkness, and then there was light, which is the equivalent of what we call Helem, concealment, V'Gilui, revelation. V'Yisachdus Lias Ma'Choshech V'Helem. And then there was the synergy between darkness and concealment, synergized together with, next page, or V'Gilui, light and revelation. Uv'Hagilui Umehagilui Helem. And out of the concealment came the revelation. So what the Rashab is saying here, that this idea of bringing together opposites begins at the very origin of creation. When Hashem created the world, the Kabbalah teaches there was right? It's complete darkness and chaos and naught and all of that, and void, Then emerged the world, Bria, Bereshis Bara Elokim. The Ramban Nachmanides teaches that Bara means there came about revelation. So just as in the example we've been giving throughout our classes, that in order for there to be revelation, there needs to be concealment, right? The teacher who desires to reveal and to teach students must first conceal his essence, his knowledge. And unless he does that, if he doesn't do that, it'll cause by the student chaos, confusion. And the same is true with parenting. If a parent acts in a way that the parent reveals too much to the child, to the children, that causes a problem. There needs to be a distance between parents and students. There needs to be distance. In children. It's one of the problems we have today, where every child is a chat friend with the father and the mother. No, sorry. I'm the mother, I'm the father, you're my child. And you need to set those boundaries. You don't set the boundaries, you got a lot of problems. And you're going to have worse problems. I'm not cursing and I'm not giving you the future. It's just the facts of life. The teacher has to create boundaries. How do you create boundaries? by hiding, by that's not a good word, by concealing, by minimizing his knowledge. His knowledge, he has to, reduce, hide, conceal. I once met Tzimtzum, exactly. I once met in Yerushalayim in the Gaivet, the Goynav Bezdin of the Haredim over there. I think his name at the time was Rabbi Weiss. And I ended up davening in his shul, which was in a building, in the same building he lived. And I met there someone who was a grandson of a Hasidic Rebbe, who I met in Crown Heights as well. And I knew that he had a very strong relationship with Rabbi Yoel Kahn, my mashpia. So I asked him, could you tell me, what, in your opinion, what is so amazing about Rabbi Yoel Kahn? I wanted to get his, and he wasn't Chabad. Actually, he lived in the Upper West Side, and he was a very successful businessman. And together with that, he had this lineage, and I think he learned in Lakewood. He was all around a very successful person, very successful. So, knowing that he had this relationship and he actually learned with Rabbi Yoel, I don't know if every day or every week, whatever, while he lived in Crown Heights, I don't know. So I just asked him. So he said, this is what he told me. Rabbi Yoel's genius is not in what he says. His genius is in what he doesn't say. Did you guys hear that? His genius is in what he doesn't say. It's easy to be a genius in what you say. Everyone hears you loud and clear. Wow. Unbelievable. Great idea. What about the koyach hatzimtzum? And I just want to say, as an aside for a moment, that's really true Chabad, is in the koyach hatzimtzum. The amkus, the depth of this approach to Hashem is not in what is revealed in what I say, it's in what I don't say. Now you go figure it out. Now you shouldn't be wondering why most people don't become Chabadniks, because this is a tough road to go figure out and come to the conclusion that what I don't say is the ultimate and the deepest and the highest. You need to be savvy for that, and you need to have patience, and you need to really spend a lot of time and thought. But anyway, that's not for now. That's what I'm bringing. So the Rebbe Rashab is teaching us here that this koyach of tzimtzum, as Yoni says, or he calls it here choshech and helen, if accessed and done right, it's an unbelievable tool for growth. You understand? I'm in my 60s already, and I many times I reflect on things that my teachers taught me when I was a young boy, a teenager, etc. And I think about some of those things, and only now do I realize the depth in some of those things. And I also realize some of the things that I missed opportunities because I was in a mode of gilui. I was not in a mode of Helen. You want to hear an example of that? I got married. I was 23 years old. My wife's from Australia. So I went to Australia with a family to get married. And I met Hasidim of the Rebbe Rashab and the Friedeker Rebbe and the Rebbe, and it wasn't a large community, but it was a very small, tight-knit Hasidic community. And what I was into, this was just a gold mine. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane. Yes, Moshe.
Sorry to interrupt. Was this in Melbourne or Sydney?
In Melbourne.
Okay.
2 weeks later, I was on a plane back to New York, and my wife asked me before we left, why are we leaving so early? We could spend some more time here and you can get to know the people better, and on and on. And I said, I would love to do that, but the Rebbe's Farbringing on Purim. I got married on Purim Cotton. It was a leap year. I was there for 2 weeks, so 2 weeks later is Purim. And the Rebbe makes a Farbringen. And I didn't want to miss the Farbringen. I wanted to be at the Farbringen. And that's what we did. Years later, I said, I made such a mistake. I mean, again, everything is hashgacha pratis. But here I had on my fingertips these genuine older Hasidim that I could have spent hours talking with them, learning from them, farbringing with them. I would have material for another 10 books. And because of my zealotry, that I have to be at the Rebbe's Farbringen, which is what I would call Gilui revelation. Chaim Zev, you understand? It's amplification. Being a 770 with 5,000 people with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, there's no greater revelation than that. It feels great. It's special. And it's a good thing. The Helem, what would be the Helem? The concealment and darkness would be staying in Melbourne, spending time with these older Hasidim, which, of course, I would gain from it, but compared to the Rebbe's Farbringen, it seems like a no-brainer. But in hindsight now, I realize that was a shortcoming of mine. It was my youthful zealotry that drove me to tell my wife, to say, let's go, we have to go back. And I remember saying, stay a little longer. I said, no, I don't want to stay longer. So you wake up, you smell the coffee, 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, because they're all gone. And Baruch Hashem, I did hear things from them, and I've written about them, but I'm just saying that there is a virtue to tzimtzum. This is so antithetical to the world we live in. I think about this. The world we live in is all about self-gratification, immediate gratification, gilui. In your shuls, who is appreciated more? The big talker, the big teacher, or someone sitting in a corner to themselves? It takes a smart person. It takes a clever person. It takes a deep person to realize that's the answer. The one who's quiet, unassuming. There lies the deepest, the strongest, the best. By the way, I got to give credit to us Lubavitcher Chassidim, because we saw that in the Rebbe in the 1940s and ultimately chose him as the Rebbe over his brother-in-law, who was more of a public figure, more not flashy, but had an imagery about himself as a statesman, a top hat, with a very nice combed beard. He had, and he was older, and he knew everyone and anyone in the greater New York area from when he arrived, because many of them came from Russia or their parents, and he knew them. And the Hasidim said, you're a great man, you're a special man, and we have a place for you. But for a Rebbe, this quiet man, who's so unassuming, who no one knows really what he's thinking about because he doesn't talk much, he is the one to lead us in the next generation post-Holocaust. So they made a great choice. They realized that this Helem, this Tzimtzum, this is where it's at. But by and large, it's not that way. So this is what the Maimer, if we take these deep ideas that we're learning, these Maimarim, I want to actualize them so that we can walk away with something concrete. This is a concept that the Rebbe is speaking about over here. Bereshis bara Elikim, Chazal said, Bereshis chashaycha v'hodar nehayra. First there's darkness, and then there's light. You have to have darkness first in order to appreciate light. You give everything to a child, believe me, it's going to backfire, spoiling them. And the same is within our life. So the appreciation, I say to myself and to my friends and to others, the fact that we had the Rebbe for 42 years physically alive, that's a blessing. Now, take that and, go to the bank with it. Make something of it. Let's see what you're worth. You were spoon-fed everything. 42 years. God Hashem says, that's it. For now, that's it, right? Okay, now what are you going to do with it? So, and Baruch Hashem, a lot of nice things are happening. And important things. But that's the whole idea of when you have, in other words, now when there's darkness, if about Chassidim, the Rebbe is not physically alive and all that, right? But it's choshech, it's darkness. But with this darkness, you can make light. You make the ultimate light. Let's continue in the text. So he says, Dehina Yadu, it's known, Mashakosov Be'etz Chayim, what's written in the Kabbalah Sefer book called The Tree of Life, Eitz Chayim. The Koydem at Simtzu Barishin, before the first contraction, Hanikre Mokim Ponui, which is called the empty place, the place of void. There was nothing there. Except, the infinite light of God filled the entire area. All there was the revelation of the infinite God as he is to himself. Next page. This is what we say in the morning in the preliminaries to David to Shachris. Before you created the world, all there was he, God, and his name alone. And as we also say, Ata Kodesh, you are holy. V'shimcha Kodesh, next page, and your name is holy. And so too we also say Mincha Shabbos, at Mincha time. V'chein Ata Echad, you are one. V'shimcha Echad, and your name is one. Shezeh P'chines Malchus Dein Sof, this is what Kabbalah calls the level of kingship within the infinite God. Shenikra Shmei HaGodol, which is referred to God's great name. Shmei Rabba. Amen Yehei Shmei Rabba. Isser. The great name, Shmei Rabba. Now you know, Isser, what does Shmei Rabba refer to? You have an address now. You have a link. It's called Malchus de Ein Sof. The Malchus of the infinite. Shekolo b'muhusevatzmusi yisbarach mamish, which is included in the very essence of God in actuality. And afterwards, God contracted himself. Why, Chaim Zev, did he contract himself? Because there wouldn't be able to be the emergence of a physical world if the infinity of God is present. So what did he do? As Yoni said, he made a contraction on his infinity. So the original energy and light and illumination of God removed itself, and it included itself back in Atzmus Ein Sof. By the way, it doesn't say here it got lost. It doesn't say it was eliminated, Moshe. It took a retreat. Where did it retreat back into? The Godhead. So if the infinity of God, which was all over, takes a retreat, what's left? A place where something can emerge, which is not godly. There has to be a remnant of the original light. This is called the Chassidus Chevra. Listen to the word Rishimu, Rishim. Okay, Rishimu, you'll see that in different discourses. The Rishimu. The Rishimu means a remnant. There has to be a remnant of the original light. Why?
Or impression.
An impression, thank you. Why, Yoini, must there be an impression? I'll tell you why. Because if there isn't an impression, we go off on our own cockle-doodle ideas. And we come up with cuckoo ideas and we go astray. You have to have it based and predicated on God's light. Okay? Very, very important. Moshe, this is a lesson for you in your art. I'm serious. That the idea of infinity, that creative idea that comes to you, there must be some remnant of it as you continue drawing and stroking and making the picture and all that. If you lose sight of the idea and there's no remnant of the idea anymore, that painting will come out not great, or not as great as you want it to be. There has to be in the details of the painting a remnant of the infinity, which would be in this case the creative idea of God's infinity. Infinity, Moshe, means removal from details. The abstract, okay? Maybe that's the right word, Moshe. The abstractness of purity, of holiness, there should be some remnant of it as you continue drawing and developing. Because that's what he's saying here. Doing the way Hashem does it with the world, it works. A world emerges. A world that emerges based on a remnant of the infinite light. Let's continue. The remnant is just but 1 point. Next page. Kinekudas the yud, just like we spoke in the previous chapters about the point of the yud. And in this point, it includes everything in potentia that could be and will be in the progression and development of the energy. Next page. This is what is left over of the point after the contraction. Since the original light and illumination, the worlds cannot receive this. It's too overwhelming. Therefore, Hashem made it that he concealed and contracted this infinite energy within himself. And what was left over was only a point. Next page. Which is a mere, it's like nothing if you compare it to the entire infinity. Which this and only this amount can come to revelation. And he gives a mashal to understand this. He gives a parable. From the mashal, from the parable of the teacher, the mashpia, the influencer, and the makabel and the recipient, as you mentioned earlier. Since the very essential information of the teacher, the recipient cannot receive because it's too overwhelming. Therefore, it has to be the mashpia, the teacher, should hide within himself all of his depth of his knowledge. And what remains over is only 1 point, which can be received by the recipient. So, is using this now as an example, a parable. So in the moral, we understand, this is the way it is in spiritual terms. The essential light of God was concealed, and what was left over was only the point of a remnant, an impression, as Yanni says, an impression. That impression is based on the ability of the emergence of the worlds to receive. However, okay, we'll stop here. And we'll stop here, and hopefully tomorrow we can finish. Any questions on this? Clear? Okay. Zeit gesund, everyone. Have a great day. Only Psudas Tevis. Yes, what?
Dalfin.
Yes.
Sorry, the last point.
Yes.
Maybe I'll ask tomorrow. We can maybe go back a few lines just to drop. I didn't catch in terms of the the worlds, the last point that you said before Amnam, Lifei Erech Olamos. I didn't catch the.
He's saying in the moral, the world that's created can only be if the infinity of the light retracts to within itself, just as the teacher's knowledge, the infinite knowledge, the amount the teacher has to hold back, and then what he leaves over is just a little bit that is applicable and able for the recipient to receive. So too, the worlds now have something, a nakuda, that from that nakuda, that which is a remnant, an impression of the infinite light of Hashem, they could accept and deal with and develop. That is the moral to the parable that he gives. Okay. Seid gesund. We'll see everyone tomorrow. Have a great day.